Old Man Daniker loved Halloween too well. In Corydon, Indiana, nobody went up to Old Man Daniker's place alone on Halloween. You always took a friend. Halloween a few years ago, Paul and Laurie Royce, they went up that hill in the dark. They got to the top, and they were looking at the cornfield. And of course, it was yellow and whispering kind of in the wind. Look at that, Paul. They could see the scarecrows. Daniker had them all over the cornfield, and they were moving back and forth in the wind. And they knew one of those scarecrows was going to be Old Man Daniker. Paul was in the 5th grade then, Laurie in the 3rd, so he went ahead. It's all right, Laurie. He went through those corn stalks until he got to one of the scarecrows that was moving. He touched it. It was just a scarecrow. It's all right, Laurie, come on this way. Laurie got kind of confused and lost in those corn stalks. She went over by a scarecrow, and she could have sworn it was moving. She looked up at it. Happy Halloween! It's Old Man Daniker! She was so frightened she ran as hard as she could through that cornfield to the dark house, and there was Mrs. Daniker. It's all right. Come on, Laurie, come on. Oh, there, child. You never mind my husband. He gets crazy on Halloween. Paul, you come on in here, too. Now, come on. I'm going to give you some of the fat fudge, 2 pieces each now. It's all right. Well, they got that fat fudge, and it almost made it worth it, almost. Daniker come into his own house about 9:30 that night. He was wearing a ratty old tuxedo, and there was still sticks in the arms. He had straw coming out of the neck and the hands. You know, I'm sick of just being Scarecrow Daniker out there. I want to go down the town, and I want to scare someone half to death, maybe more. Shut up, Clem, she said. Look at yourself. You look like a fool. Get that straw out of there, take a bath, and get into bed. You got to be the print shop early in the morning. She kept a tight rein on Old Man Daniker, and everybody was glad of that. Well, she took sick in November, and she died. It was in January that Daniker started walking around that print shop. He does the printing for the newspaper. They could hear him talking. Well, there's no one holding me back now. There's no one holding me back. Daniker used to always sit on the liar's bench at noon, have his lunch and his hot tea. Didn't matter how cold it was. The liar's bench in Corydon, it must have been there 70 years. A couple of years ago, they tried to get rid of it because they were going to build a building. Well, there was a protest, and they moved the building instead of the liar's bench. Daniker's always there at noon. He was sitting there one February day, noon, drinking the hot tea. A couple of fellas sat down. Cold, Daniker. Oh, it's getting cold every day. What's headlines for tomorrow? Are you coming up my place on Halloween? What are you talking about, Daniker? It's February. You come up my place on Halloween. It's going to be a burial. Well, it got so nobody would sit on the liar's bench when Daniker was there, because all he talked about was Halloween. Of course, Bessie Meta, the widow, she'd sit there. She'd look at him and say, I don't scare easy, Daniker. And Uncle Doctor, he went by one day. Daniker's talking about a burial on Halloween, and Uncle Doctor leaned down and said, well, I'll have to sign the death certificate. Well, Daniker kept sitting there talking about Halloween. Before you know it, the fall had come, and he's sitting on that liar's bench one October day. Paul Royce, in the 6th grade now, is going home. The liar's bench is in an alley right off the main street. Daniker's got this big overcoat. Hey, Paul. Paul, come over here. Hello, Mr. Daniker. I want you to take a picture of me. I haven't got a camera. I got the camera, Paul. I got a Polaroid. Here, now you take it back up. Now, wait a minute. I'm going to take this coat off. Daniker was wearing a ratty old tuxedo underneath with straw coming out of the neck. All right, now wait, let me get the arms out. Now, wait, I got to put this on. Daniker, he picked up a pumpkin he'd hollowed out with a crazy smile on it, put it on his head. All right, take the picture. Take the picture! I got it. Yeah, well, you're not going nowhere till we see how it comes out. Oh, come over here. Oh, it's coming out nice. You tell your father. Come up my place on Halloween. It's gonna be a burial. Scarecrow Daniker. I hope not. Well, I hope so, Paul. Now, goodbye. Paul went home and told his father what happened. His father, Fred Royce, made some calls, and parents decided no one was going up to Daniker's unless they all went together. They'd make a party of it. Well, Halloween morning come, kids are running to school down the main street. We got those gas lanterns in Corydon still. The kids noticed that somebody had put pumpkins on the gas lanterns with a kind of crazy smile. In the cafe, people are reading the newspaper. On page 3, there was a big black border, and there was a tombstone. It said, Scarecrow Daniker. Well, the editor, he called Daniker's house, find out who put that in the paper. Daniker, is that you? Somebody had picked up the phone. Daniker? Daniker? Whoever it was hung up on the editor. Halloween night. Must have been 70 people. They all went up together up to old Man Daniker's. They're all laughing and having a fine time till they got to the top of the hill, and that corn is whispering in the breeze. People spread out and went through the cornfield, and they're jumping here and there, touching the scarecrows. None of them were Daniker. Daniker's house was in dark. It was Fred Royce who went up on the porch, and he knocked on the door. Daniker! Happy Halloween, trick or treat! And all of a sudden, the place was on fire. Every room in the place was on fire. Everybody got back in the fire. It was a fierce fire, and you could look in the living room. There must have been 30 pumpkins, and they're all melting like they're made of wax. Everyone's getting back and back. They got the firemen up there, but there was nothing they could do. That place was burning too bad. They were going back and back away from that heat, back and back. And the little boy, he tripped over a tombstone. It said, Scarecrow Daniker lies here. So the firemen come over, and they kept digging till they came to it, a casket. Got the ropes underneath, and they pulled the casket up. The fire chief, Fred Higgins, would you get the kids back? Would you please get the kids back? Bring the flashlights over here. All right, open up the casket. Open it up. Oh, my. Scarecrow Daniker in here. He got that tuxedo on. He got a pumpkin on his head. Fire chief picked up the arm and said, It ain't Daniker at all. It's a scarecrow. It's nothing but a scarecrow here. You men, you stay here. When that fire's out, I want you poking through it. See if you find any bones. We don't know if Daniker's alive or he's dead. Nobody did. They didn't find any bones. Well, of course, November come, and Thanksgiving's on its way, so everybody forgot that, and getting busy as can be. It was Wednesday evening. At Bessie Meta, you know, the widow, she went out to the Baptist cemetery, put a wreath on her husband's grave. She started to tear up a little bit, took off her glasses, and she thought she heard something. She dropped those glasses. She's helpless without them, so she got down on her hands and knees. She's trying to find the glasses. She thought she heard them snap. She looked up behind the tombstone. She thought this black dog was coming at her. And she's looking at old Man Daniker's face. Well, Bessie she made it back to town, but she spent the next month in bed. People started looking over their shoulders. It was late March, cold as can be. Uncle Doctor, he came back late that night from the hospital in Louisville. He'd been at work 18 hours. He was glad to see the light on the drugstore. It's usually closed at 10 o'clock. Uncle Doctor went in. Glad you're open, Russell. 62 years old. I'm too old for these days. I know you're in the back room. I can see a shadow there. You just finish up those prescriptions, and I'll get myself one of these cheese crackers. And I'd like a hot cup of coffee. Uncle Doctor went over and sat down, opened up his newspaper, got one of those cheese and peanut butter crackers, ripped it open. Then he saw the coffee. It was being slid towards him. It was steaming, and somehow he just stared at that coffee, and he saw a man's fingers going right into the coffee, stirring it. And he looked up, and there's old Man Daniker, smiling at him. And Daniker handed him a death certificate to sign. Uncle Doctor's frozen, and Daniker just smiled and walked out the back. After that, we're all looking over our shoulders. I'm in the auto parts business, and I was driving home late one night. I take the low road, pretty lonely. Someone was hitchhiking, so I pulled over to pick him up. All of a sudden, his hands went straight out like he was a scarecrow. I pulled that wheel and nearly hit a truck coming the other way. I stepped on the gas. In my rearview mirror, I could have sworn it was old Man Daniker. Halloween come around again. We're all pretty edgy. Everybody saw the gas lamps. They had those pumpkins. Someone put them on the night. That Halloween morning, we're sitting in the cafe having coffee, and somebody had the Louisville Courier. Hey, look at this. Something about Corydon. Classified ad here. It says, "One more time in Corydon, then I'm going town to town." Signed OMD. What do you suppose that is? It's Daniker. That's who it is. It's Daniker. It's old Man Daniker. Daniker? Yeah, it's Daniker. Crazy old man is coming back tonight and keeping my kids in. Not many people went out for Halloween in Corydon that night. The Royces did, a few lively people. All the merchants, they kept everything open on the main street, so there's plenty of lights, and of course there were the houses along the side streets there. Jenny Robbins, she went out with the Royces. You know Jenny, she's tan and got those pigtails, and she's got enough freckles to cover a beach. She's a lot of fun. Well, Jenny ran by the drugstore, ran down the alley past the liar's bench because she was going to scare the Royces. She's halfway down the alley in the dark, and she's leaning against a lamppost that was all dark, and she thought it moved, and poor Jenny, she couldn't breathe. She reached back and touched it, and it seemed to be metal. And she managed finally to turn around. And it was just a lamppost. And she turned back, and she saw it hanging there. It was a man hanging by the neck. The Royces come running around and saw the figure hanging there, and out of the darkness someone jumped. "Happy Halloween!" The old Man Daniker laughing and running out the back of the alley. They cut the body down. It was nothing but a scarecrow in a ratty old tuxedo. This Halloween, when you go out, if I were you, I'd have a friend or two with you, because old Man Daniker's probably going to be in your town, hiding behind a tree, in a ratty old tuxedo, waiting. Happy Halloween.